Chapter 4 of When Woman Proposes by Anne Warner. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Jen Broda. Chapter 4 The Bird Sings in Its Cage. The pretty nurse stood in the window putting fresh flowers in the bowl that changed its color and form daily. The flowers were narcissuses, and their stray heads rose erect upon long and delicate stems of pale, pale green, which one of the nurse's hands held tenderly in place, while the other arranged cross-crystallizations of asparagus vine so as to support the straight up-and-down effect. The nurse's hands were as waxy white as the narcissus petals, as firmly delicate as their pale green stems. Mowbray, lying as usual upon the large brass bed, whose draperies had been banished the night he entered there, was singularly happy and content to watch through half-closed eyelids those fingers wandering in and out among the white and green. The bird was singing as ever. His dreams were becoming realities. His hopes were trembling on the borderland of breathing life. The world at large was also hedging on a new entrance into a possible reawakening. The murmurs of spring were particularly reiterant and loud this spring. Forces that hardly knew their own force were stirring to life with a strength that this time might refuse to be put down. Another swaying outside upon a branch above where his mate was brooding voiced unconsciously a cry that should ever be a song and yet is, alas, too often a wail or, worse yet, a moan. Those who had ears for bird song, cry, and moan were toiling sleeplessly, while others who heard nothing or refused attention to what they did hear were walking blindly, on. So many, many threads gathered into the unopened fist of fate, weaving, day in, day out. Back and forth flew the shuttle, and into that wondrous warp and woof went bird song and hunger sob, editorial and report of mine accident, discontent, willful deafness to the appeal of right, unselfish devotion, selfish neglect of duty, the love of a woman who had never loved, and the divine omnipotence of God. They were all weaving and interweaving ceaselessly, each second adding to the strength of their fabric, and the breeze that floated abroad carrying the pollen of life from blossom to blossom intermingled with the ether that bore hither and thither from soul to soul the mysterious message of what was soon to be. Mowbray, watching the figure in the window, became conscious after a long spell of dreamy contemplation of the certainty that when she was finished, she would turn to him. The certainty gave him great content to wait, and made the waiting a further joy of contemplation. Her head was so charmingly upborne by the white throat that rose out of the smooth folds of the little linen kerchief. Every line of her figure was sweet with the mixed grace of childish curves lingering into womanhood. And her hair, just stirred by the breeze, and her ear, just revealed by the same kindly fairy, and her smile, just half showing itself when the bird hushed his chant to the soft liquid gasps that gave him renewal of strength and breath, and her lashes, downcast towards the happy quivering flowers. Yes, Mowbray was well content to lie still and wait. But at last she was all through with her task, and in the same instant she came directly to him, just as he had hoped. Her step was very light at first, and the glance that she directed towards him was one of hushed inquiry. But he opened his eyes and looked straight at her, and at the sight the color rose up all over her face. An exceeding gladness overspread her eyes and lips, and quickly approaching the bedside, she exclaimed with joyous conviction, "Oh, you are much, much better." He tried to raise his hand, but he could not manage the effort, so he smiled. She understood. He saw her white throat swell and contract quickly as the ready mist fled over her joyous eyes. And then she pulled a little low chair close beside the bed, sank down upon it, and drew one of his long, thin, wasted hands into the warm clasp of her own too. "In a few days," she said, looking deep into the question of his sunken eyes, "in a few more days more, we shall be able to talk together." He panted hard for breath. One importunate longing to know choked him worse than all else. "Where am I?" he managed at last. She looked thoughtfully at him. "You are in a private hospital," she answered gently. He could not speak again. The muscles of his throat seemed as if paralyzed by their long disuse, but his eyes wandered here and there over the limitless luxury of the room, and then sought her face. A great blush arose and tinged all her features. "Forgive me," she said. "I will never lie to you again. It was agreed that we should tell you that you were in a hospital." He opened his lips, but this time no sound came. "You are in the house before which you met with the accident," she told him next, as if that were the answer he craved. Then she raised his hand and looked at the blue veins that showed so plainly and seemed to measure his weakness and to consider. It was a fearfully pitiful, strengthless hand for a man to have to own, and he saw her face fill with such a tender sorrow as she lowered her eyes upon it that the insistent question beset him worse than ever, and his own eyes cried aloud what his will was too weak to voice. From his eyes with their passionate pleading to his hand lying helpless in hers, her gaze went back and forth, back and forth. Finally, she lifted up the hand, and he thought for an instant that she was going to kiss it, and perhaps she thought so too, at first. But then she only rested her chin against it, and, holding it thus, pressed softly and warmly against the soft warmth of her own throat, she said, gently, "You are in my house." Then she laid his hand back upon his bosom, rose quickly from the chair, crossed to the dresser, took off her white cap and apron, gathered them up in one hand, and left the room at once. In her own boudoir, Natalie found Catherine Dupre. "Well, I have told him," she announced, beginning to unbutton her uniform. "He knows now." "My dear," exclaimed Mrs. Dupre. "Yes, I told him. He is a great deal more in his mind than the doctor or anyone guesses. He wants to know things, only he isn't able to speak, so nobody thinks so. He wanted to know where he was, so I told him. I told him a hospital, and he didn't believe it, so I told him it was my house. He'll be able to sleep now, and that will do him good." Mrs. Dupre's eyes approximated Mowbray's in the force of their further question. Natalie was, as ever, responsive. "It's no use wanting to know what he said, because he didn't say anything. He's too weak. But it really isn't necessary for him to say anything, because if I can be alone with him, I can tell exactly what he would say if he could. And of course, it's no strain on him, because I can answer in words." By this time, she had shed the uniform and was pulling down the prim little coiffure which went with it. "Did you tell him who you were?" Mrs. Dupre asked. "No, he wouldn't know who I was anyway." "He might remember things that were said in the papers, dear." "Then I don't want him to know who I am. I don't want him to remember me by those things that were said in the paper." She was shaking her hair about her face as she spoke, and her tone verged suddenly towards passionate protest. "I don't want him to measure me by anything but just what I am to him, by just what I have been since I have known him. No one in the world ever ought to judge anyone by any other standard than just what they are for and to that person himself." She parted her hair into two thick masses, and holding them back upon either temple with outspread fingers, looked steadily forth and down upon her friend. "Don't you see that I am not to be measured now by any standard of last winter? Haven't I altered? Am I not altering every day? I never guessed that there could be such a sensation of change as I feel each second that I spend in there with him. I feel myself growing different, I feel myself growing more different all the time. I can hardly wait for him to be strong enough so that I may tell him all about it." Mrs. Dupre kept silent a little. Then she said, "And your resolution to become thoroughly conventional?" Natalie heaped her hair yet more together. "I am not forgetting that," she said. "I am not forgetting anything." She passed into her dressing room beyond and returned in a minute, fastening the knots of a silken tea gown. "To think that I used to often wonder why I was born." She paused before a long triple mirror and began to coil her hair into form as she spoke. "I could not understand at all then, and now I see it all so clearly and know it all so well." "My dear child," said the friend fondly. In her voice lay an echo that was not without an admonitory note. "I know what you are thinking of," said the younger woman, smiling. "Don't worry, dear Catherine. Only wait and see." "I shall wait," Mrs. Dupre said. "Then you shall see." She paused a minute, and then suddenly threw her arms about her friend's neck. "Oh, Catherine, the power of loving a man in the way that I love. You know I told you that nothing could stand against it. Nothing could. Nothing has. It is all in his eyes each time that I see them. They are my eyes. I knew it from the beginning. He is all mine." End of chapter 4.